You're listening to On Mission with Dr. Matt Davis, a podcast designed to explore the personal mission of everyday leaders. Hear from men and women who are making a difference in their corner of the world and discover what keeps them on mission. Welcome to On Mission. I am Matt Davis, and a very exciting couple of guests today. It's been a rare thing that we've had two guests and one host. Normally we have two hosts and one guest, and so this is an awesome opportunity. I was trying to think through who we've had at the same time. You guys are the fourth combo guests. We had Dr. and Mrs. Marriott, the chancellor. We had Dr. and Mrs. Anderson, the president. We had Dr. and Mrs. Graham, the incoming vice president for academic affairs. And now the Burckarts. I mean, let's go. You guys are in rare territory here. This is Brendan and Sidney Burkhart. They are both alumni of Maranatha. They live in Columbia, Missouri, where Sidney is an attorney and Brendan is a senior staff accountant at an accountant firm of Williams Keepers. Sidney's an associate attorney at, is it Hayden or Haddon?
Hayden.
Hayden and Colbert, or is it Colbert?
It's Colbert.
Okay. And we are here for the Leader to Leader conference, and so there's kind of a buzz going on outside the studio today as networking. I think this is the networking hour. I actually hate networking, so I'd much rather hide in here with you guys and talk and have a good time. And it is going to be a good time today. Brendan enjoys reading. I knew that about you. Sidney enjoys running. I knew that about you. But I didn't know cooking.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. Okay. You're in agreement on that.
Yeah,
You're the beneficiary.
Yep.
Favorite meals are Mexican and a steak dinner, which I can agree with. But here's where we run into all of a sudden our first problem of the afternoon.
Oh, boy.
And that is that, Brendan, you and I share something in common. We are Cubs fans.
We sure are,
But there's a problem.
Yep.
Because, Sidney, of all the possible teams you could support, and we would have no problem with that whatsoever, you have to go and be a Cardinals fan.
I am a native Missourian, so it's
Still, though,
on the east side of the state, too. So
have you not read the verse, "Be ye not unequally yoked"? I mean, what do you think that means if it doesn't mean Cubs and Cardinals fans should not get married?
it's
I mean,
definitely been a point of strife and contention continually in our marriage.
Well, let's just say if that's the worst thing you have to fight about, you're doing pretty good.
What was it? One of your close
when I
family
brought him
friends?
to my home church for the first time when we were dating,
Yeah.
my best friend's dad came up to me and said, "Do you have no standards?"
And he was probably pretty serious.
Oh, yeah.
He was.
that.
So.
Oh, man. I grew up in Danville, which is kind of just across from St. Louis and all that.
It's a
just
dividing
far enough,
line.
Yeah, just far enough from Chicago for people to start to cool on the Cubs. But I was a Cubs fan, and just close enough to St. Louis that even some of the people in our church were fans. And it almost created a few, divisions within the assembly, But we are just really excited. Welcome to the podcast this afternoon.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So I just couldn't be more excited when I saw that you guys were going to be here for Leader to Leader. And I'm like, I don't care what else has to happen, but we got to have a chance to talk to you guys and just see. We'll just check in like every 5 years. All right. We'll have you back and we'll find out, okay, now what's happening? What does life look like? And it's like they bury time capsules and then they go back to see what life was like. So it's like a reverse time capsule. And you guys were both great students. Brendan, I love you, but your wife was my favorite student. And you still hold the record. And Sidney, you need to understand, all three of my sons have now attended Maranatha as students. But you are still number one.
Still hold the record.
Yes, you are the best. And we had a great time. You were a great help to us in helping recruiting all the time and coming in and talking to prospects. And obviously pursuing law didn't hurt. But we've had other students pursue law too. But it has just been really great to see God put the pieces together in your lives. And that's really what we want to talk about today. The podcast is devoted to having conversations with people about what is your mission in life. And lots of times we do talk to people that are kind of on the other end of career in life, and they have a great perspective to offer even to young people. And I think there's a time and a place, obviously, to give reverence and attention to that. But you guys are a few years removed from college, but kind of close. And so you may be like, well, I don't know what you want me to say, but honestly, I think it's a fresh perspective, and I think this will be a great conversation to have at sort of that beginning part, those first steps. And perhaps those that are in college now might look at you guys as role models and actually say, hey, what does it look like in the very first steps out of college, and kind of see a little bit about what the path looks like at that point. So we are looking forward to that a great deal. So we kind of have to hit you with that pretty deep question right off the bat and say, okay, you're young, but what is your mission in life? And by the way, if you can get this nailed down now, you'll be off in a great trajectory.
Yeah. So ironically, when we were asked to do the podcast, we both looked at each other and said, "Oh boy, how do we answer this?
We are not qualified.
How do we answer this question?" Some days we feel like we're just in absolute survival mode to just live.
Yeah.
But the longer we talked about it and really put some thought to it, we kind of came back to the idea of we want to be what all believers strive to be, and that's to pursue Christ likeness. And how do we do that? Well, if you were at part of Leader to Leader an hour ago, we just got to hear from Pastor Minnick, who reminded us of fearing the Lord. And to do that, we need to be students of the Word.
We were talking through, a mission statement, which we did not really have, but a few key phrases kept coming back to our minds. And really the premier one is the Bible is the sole authority for faith and practice. And Dr. Saxon would be so proud of us for remembering that. But the more it comes up on a daily basis that if we're going to pursue Christ likeness and we're going to do our jobs the way that Christ wants us to, he is our authority.
Yeah.
And we were thinking through verses that reflect that, and he pulled up
2 Timothy 3. It's hard to ignore that verse, which tells us all Scripture is given by inspiration of God, and it's profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness. The result, that the man of God may be perfect, thoroughly furnished unto all good works.
Right.
Christ's likeness is pursuing what those good works that he's given us to do.
Yeah.
And we can only pursue that when we have a right understanding of what God has given before us.
Well, and that tells us that God has said something and that his word is an authority in what I do day in and day out at the law firm, what he does at the accounting firm, that it matters. He has said something that matters to what I'm supposed to do and how I'm supposed to do it. And that has to be the paramount authority, even if we gather wisdom and through our relationships, through coworkers, through people who have gone before us, that at some level, well, at the paramount level, the word of God has to be the principal thing and the principal authority.
So both of you were good students and pursued pretty rigorous career ambitions, right? I mean, it's not easy to become an attorney or an accountant or professional of any kind, really, but you didn't shy away from the challenge of that. How do you see where you're at now? Careers are starting to come into focus, and you have, those opportunities that are those first stages of career establishment are now behind you. You finished law school successfully and did very well and passed the bar exam, and you've been able to work your way through and get established in the firm, and now all of a sudden there are clients looking at you for answers, and when you've made a huge shift from being the one that's served. As a student, you're the customer and everyone's serving you, to being the one providing the service and being the expert and being the answer person. That's a pretty big difference, right? I mean, are you noticing that transition?
Oh yeah, I think being in the professional world, not as a student for a few years, I got to see it. And now that she's now working full time, where we both come home and there's light bulb moments for Sidney to where, oh, I now know what you were talking about. The first year of you being in a public accounting firm, of the client is not just asking about work, we're counseling them on life.
Yeah.
And it just becomes this. It's not just the work and the service we're providing them to. One, I mean, ultimately our firms get paid out of it. That's a benefit. But then also we're building a relationship to hopefully down the road continue that service for them. And it's becoming more than just a work relationship, but depending on the client, they become maybe friends or close. They rely on us to provide this aspect of whether it's the accounting and tax advisory service or the legal service, to where we can be a staple force in their business or family, to more than just, hey, he's my accountant, he does my taxes every year. That's it.
Well, that people like to keep some of that arm's length, but then all of a sudden you're in the moment, in the room with them, especially as an attorney, through some pretty dark days, some pretty tough situations. Most of the time when someone comes to an attorney, it's one of the worst days of their life, not because of the attorney.
Hopefully not.
But, you know, your firm does estate planning, and you do work with agriculture a lot. A lot of your clients, you said, are farmers and people like that. Down to earth, hardworking people. It's gratifying to be able to help people in that role, isn't it?
Yes. And it's, you know, you're absolutely right. I had a law professor that said nobody comes to an attorney until the situation is already out of control. Yes. And I do feel like my work mostly is on the front side of the problem, trying to prevent the problems.
That is a nice
by
part
getting
about your practice
a
area.
good plan in place. But sometimes what has spurred a person to come in is a terrible problem, or that they had a really bad experience with a parent's estate or something like that. And then, you know, they've had an experience with family fallout, or they're trying to prevent family fallout. And so even though estate planning, which is what I do, is not, you know, the dirtiest part of the law or the worst, you're dealing with the worst aspects of the law, you still see a lot of brokenness. And like he said, we've noticed that interpersonal connection with clients, of trying to just guide them in a compassionate way through a really difficult time of their lives, or in a technical subject matter that they know nothing about.
Very intimidating.
Yes.
Very scary. And, you know, I always say about estate planning, people put it off for two very obvious reasons. You know, one, nobody likes to think about their own death. You just don't. Even believers, you know, we don't like to think about the fact that someday we're not going to be around. And number two, probably worse, you have to talk to lawyers, you know, gross. And nobody wants to do that. And they think it's going to be expensive, and there aren't going to be any good answers, and, you know, all of that. So when you can actually come alongside them and make a difference, that really is an eye-opening, almost life-changing kind of a thing. And it gives you entrance to be able to speak truth in a way that you would never have had as a normal person.
Yep.
You know, you're married to a normal person, but now you're a lawyer. And so you don't probably even remember how you thought before you
It's changed a lot. Law school.
Did you notice that? All of a sudden
Yes.
you think differently?
So
you see
I
the world?
actually recently took a personality test, and I had taken one before, and I took the same one after,
that's
and like
interesting.
2 of my letters have changed
Really?
since law school. Yes.
Oh, that's
So,
interesting.
I don't know if you've noticed that changes much.
Did you have a
but
different wife now than you started with?
Maybe more than I've realized. No.
You used to be compatible, or now you're more compatible. I don't know. That's great.
Yeah, I think it has gone to the more compatible way, and
Oh, cool.
which is nice.
Brendan's pretty chill.
He is.
I think, I mean, just from a career standpoint, the estate planning world intersects so much with the tax world.
Sure.
Which, again, like you said, people don't really want to, that's the secondary. They don't want to talk about death, but taxes, and those are the two surest things in our world, in our life.
Franklin, yeah.
Yeah. But it's allowed us, I mean, we've joked at times if we're out at dinner somewhere and people are within earshot and we're talking about taxes, people are thinking these people are
Those
young,
poor children.
poor kids. But really, it's enabled us to see both sides of it, to better equip how we help our clients ultimately.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and we've recognized that we're in really cool roles because it's pretty abnormal for somebody at our level of career to be interfacing with clients as much as we do.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the department he's in and the size of the firm that I'm in. And it's so fulfilling because you see the value that you're creating. You know, people don't like to think about the law and taxes because it's technical, it's boring, it's numbers, it's spreadsheets, but it's what we do in the technical reading of the document or in the spreadsheets preparing the tax returns is creating value for people, for our clients, for our firm in so many ways. And if you can keep your perspective on that big picture of I'm trying to create value in as many ways as possible for my coworkers, for my boss, for my clients, then the aspect of the work that I hate when I'm proofreading a trust or drafting a consent form, that matters because it's going to add value to these people's lives and hopefully make them better.
Yeah, and that's what being a professional is all about, that you have an expertise that you can come alongside somebody when they're either intimidated by the topic or very scared about what might happen, very uncertain, and say, it's going to be okay. Trust me, I got this. This might be the first time you're going down that road, but I've been there before. And even young in your career, you can already say that. And that's really cool thing about the intensity of a specialized firm like that, is that you actually start to then see things repeat, and you can grow from experience to experience and draw from that. You kind of develop this bank of expertise that you can keep going back to. And that's when you start to really have fun in your career, right? So do you have some partners and other people that you work with, coworkers, that you can have already established some relationships where they're kind of mentoring you in that way?
Yes. My firm is smaller. There's only, I think, 7 attorneys. And so since I worked there throughout law school and from pretty much day one, I get to work really closely with the partners and really get to work with most people in the firm, which I think we would both say is a really exciting part of the workplaces that we're in, because it's really invigorating to work with really smart people.
Yeah.
And we work with some really great people that are not only just wonderful people in general, but are also really good at their craft. They're really good lawyers. They're really good accountants, and they're brilliant people, and that's really exciting for us.
Yeah, I, on the other hand, am part of a firm that's about 110 accountants, which is, for some people, just can't imagine that many of us working together at the same time. But there's a group of 16 partners, and by being a smaller firm compared to, say, the Big Four or anything like that, in a smaller market, it allows for opportunities for younger staff to interact directly with partners.
That you would never do in one of the Big Four.
Exactly. So in the almost 3 years I've been at the firm now, I can say I've worked on a group project with probably 7 of the 10 partners in the Columbia office where we're at, which is, again, like you said, just a rare occurrence.
Yeah.
And one of them in particular, who's now overseeing my department, he's kind of become my true mentor officially in the firm. And he's been at the firm for close to 30 years. He's been a partner for 15.
Yeah.
He knows accounting, and he's done it all. He's been a tax guy. He's been an audit guy. He specializes now in bankruptcy and fraud investigation. So the man can uncover anything, so to speak. And he's just a neat guy to pull information from, because he's seen it all. He's seen it from a family standpoint. He's seen it from massive publicly traded company standpoint, anything in between. And it allows us to rub shoulders with these people that have, from a professional standpoint, made it and have found their niche in the professional service, whether that's fraud or bankruptcy or estate planning or agricultural estate planning. It's a unique position to be in this early in our career, and we don't want to ignore that piece by any means.
Yeah, you have pretty privileged access to people that are operating at a high level, and that's going to jumpstart your ability to join their ranks in the same echelon of expertise. I used to love attorneys meetings, especially after a few years. Like when I first started, I'd get a phone call guy would lay out some scenario. I go, okay, well, hang on just a second. Let me go check on something real quick. And I put him on hold. I'd run over across the lawyer next door. Barb, here's what's happening. What do I tell this guy? She's like, all right, calm down. Okay, here's what you do. You tell him this, this, this. Okay. And I was a quick study, and I was humble about my own deficiency. Because in my area, no law school is teaching people religious liberty for independent Baptists. Right? That is not a specialization they teach. So I walked in with general law knowledge and no specific expertise. So all these guys who were just at the top of their game, like what you're describing, it was like so awesome to be able to learn from them. But then after a few years of that, it does take a while, you start to hear the same things and remember the lessons learned, and you're not running across the hall quite as often. And then you have your attorneys meetings, and all of a sudden, I remember the first time that Barb asked me a question. And I was like, yeah, you are. Yeah, that's right. I'm here. I'm a lawyer.
Yeah.
We're like lawyers, dudes, And I mean, that is like the greatest feeling of competence, I guess, and camaraderie, because there's nobody in the world that's going to know that like
everything.
You guys.
Mm-hmm.
Just those 7 or 8 people. And it's not about being part of a huge firm. It's about being part of a specialized group that just is working at the top of their game. And you should enjoy that. You should really savor that, because that's a pretty rare thing.
Yeah, I think we both see the value of learning from these individuals that have decades of experience in this field, but then also the privilege that it is to hopefully, kind of like the essence of the theme of leader to leader, passing the torch in our professional careers. Some of these folks, particularly in my field, are approaching the retirement stage. And so, yeah, we'd love for them to continue to be a part of the firm, and the firm would love them to be there, but there's just a natural progression of stepping up into that next role and finding the leaders to fill the gap of when they leave, who's going to take control of the firm. Or even in Sidney's situation, them as they continue to evolve their estate planning part of the firm, you need more attorneys to do that.
Well, you were a law student that worked there. Do you have a law students that are working with you?
We do. We have a couple that work part-time during the school year and then come back full-time during the breaks, and it's always all hands on deck. We save up the projects, but it is that
summarize these depositions.
yes it is. We talk about this with his job, that there's a major shortage of accountants just nationwide right now, and especially for CPAs. And in my field, and in the particular, like the agricultural niche, we're at a small firm, but my boss, Connie Hayden, she's like the lady in Missouri for agricultural estate planning.
Oh, really?
And it's people drive from all over to see her. But when she's done, these farmers have generations of people still wanting to, continue their family legacy. And she had a client ask her, well, what's gonna happen to us when you're not around anymore? And she kind of looked at me and was
boy.
Well, that's what we're working on. And that's what he's working on. Big shoes for sure. But
that's something to look forward to. It's another challenge. You guys have tackled challenge after challenge, and now you look back at some of the things that probably seemed overwhelming when you were in college and go, okay, that was actually kind of small potatoes.
And that's again the piece that's being part of a team, to where, like you said, you can run down to somebody and say, hey, I don't know the answer to this, but someone's asking me, as opposed to there's a time and a place certainly for being the one-man shop, but especially for us at the early part of our careers, it's like there's no way we could be able to run our own show at this point, because we're young.
But someday that might be on the horizon.
Maybe.
Burckart and Burckart.
Which I think that our appreciation for that, being in a setting with a wealth of knowledge, started here at Maranatha, because we pretty quickly realized, maybe didn't realize it when we were here, but shortly once we got out, the professors here are brilliant. Yeah. And you get to rub shoulders, not just in class, but with the smaller you know,
Yeah.
campus size,
Yeah.
we know our professors
Yeah.
and they know us, and we get to talk to them when we come back. And there are so many incredibly smart people
Yeah.
here that are masters of their subject field. And that's like, we've been able to experience that, me here and in law school and in our jobs, him here and then in his job as well. And that is, you know, plugging into that and appreciating that and realizing what you have and what they have to offer you just from their experience. And it's,
Yeah.
that definitely started here.
Mm-hmm.
I remember hearing Dr. Fafi's voice in my head, even though he wasn't really in the room, many times. The lessons, just the way he lived his life even serves as an example and almost becomes the standard in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And that is such a crucial thing that can't be underestimated about sort of that college choice, because this is going to become sort of the baseline of what you're aspiring to, and it better be true north, you know?
Yep.
And we think about that a lot as professors too, is like, I've got to be the kind of person that's worthy of that sort of replication. So there's a spiritual reality to that as well. My son Tim is in law school right now as a 1L, and he's having that sort of brain explosion that you have, you know, that first year. And he's doing really great. And every day he's texting me, you know, telling me what he learned. He said, so today he texted me, Dad, we just learned a rule against perpetuities. Now, I've been warning him about the rule against perpetuities since like the third grade.
Worst day of your life in law school.
Yeah. I said, well, I hate to tell you this, but wait till you learn the rule in Shelley's case, you know, and just, he's like, oh no, we didn't learn that yet, you know. And then he told me that they don't even apply the rule against perpetuities anymore. So I don't know. I have to bone up. You probably tell me on estate planning, but anyway, there's so many of those things, those moments that we do think back to those people that were in our lives as mentors and as guides. And you know, it doesn't stop. The relationship doesn't end when you graduate. It changes, and it changes for the better. I love the fact of being colleagues with our graduates and, you know, standing shoulder to shoulder and sort of being very proud of what God is doing in your lives. I know you guys have been active in your local church. You've made that a priority as you establish your family together. And that's not easy, is it? To juggle sort of ministry along with professional, emerging, you know, the firms expect a lot of time. So that's a lot to juggle, isn't it?
They absolutely do. Whether they outright say it or just from you're dealing with service. You're
Things
a service.
that matter, and you care.
You
and
care.
you want to do well.
And ultimately, from even just a business standpoint, the bottom line is dependent on how much we work, because we are the service. We're not the product.
Yep.
Or we're not producing a product. We are the product. And that is a thing that we're both figuring out as young professionals. We both work long days.
Accounting's not a 9 to 5. Being a lawyer is not a Monday to Friday job.
No, it's not. And but at the same time, as believers, that's where it comes into what is our priority. Is it being driven by the work? Is it being driven by the potential paycheck down the road? Is it driven by the stress of we have so much to do, we just got to keep plowing away? Or is that under the priority of trying to be like Christ, being involved in ministry, being involved in each other as a couple?
Yep.
It's tough. It's not an easy thing to balance. And certainly as we both are now professionals, I think we've kind of had to adjust that even more to where when Sidney was in law school, law school was a full-time commitment, no doubt, but it was also then we could come home and be a couple for the most part. Not maybe the spring season during tax season, but aside from that, whereas now it's like we're both.
She can visit you at the office or something.
Yeah, it has happened more often than we'd like sometimes. But now it's, okay, now we're both professionals, and now when we come home, there's a point where, okay, we have responsibilities in the middle of the week or on the weekend for church, for small group ministry opportunities, for connecting with people in our church. Those are just, that's time that we have to chop off and say, how are we going to squeeze this into a already full plate of just work?
And that's not just spending more of yourself or squeezing more out. It's also one of the ways that we are spiritually revitalized. And in your work, sometimes you don't even realize how much you're being drained, especially as you invest yourself into relationships with clients. And, you talked about they've made a mess of it and now they finally come in. That's why they need us. The people that don't have any problems or, have it all put together really don't need to pay an attorney to help them sort it out. I used to tell my clients, okay, especially if they were pushing back a little bit on the advice, listen, I mean this with all due respect. Your best thinking got you into this hole. It's not going to get you out. So you need help. I'm here to help you. I know what you need to do. Trust me. Let's do this. I got this. We'll do it together. And that's draining because you do care about what you do. People who have stress, I got so much stress in my job. Well, that just tells me you care about your job. You want to do well. And you do kind of identify. But ministry is also that revitalization. We start to see the Lord working in and through us, and it actually is energizing, not just draining. And if it is draining, then it's probably a good indication we're just doing it in our own strength anyway.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where the local church comes in to revitalize us, but then also encourage us, in especially, say, after a hard week where we didn't see each other a lot and we've worked maybe Saturday or whatever the case may be, but then Sunday morning we can come together, go to church, spend the day with believers that may not relate to us at all from a career standpoint, but that's okay. That's the beauty of the church.
They don't know you're a big deal.
Well, they don't need it. That's maybe true.
Well, and there's a point where faithfulness in church is not the natural inclination, because if we're being honest, at the end of a long work week, when we've been putting out fires and dealing with people, we're both naturally introverted. And so we don't really want to go put on our good face for church. And so waking up on Sunday morning and saying, I want to spend this day with other people right now is most of the time not what my brain tells me that I want to do.
Right.
But then let alone pour into somebody else. But so making the decision to go to church is not natural, but remaining faithful in doing that, we almost always came out on the other side being blessed and being re-energized and realizing that, this is why we have to be here on a weekly basis, why we have to be involved, why we can't just say, I'm too busy, so I'm not going to do this, because you make time to do what you want to do. And what you give your time to what is truly your priority. And so,
well, you guys grew up that way, and that was reinforced here at Maranatha, that it isn't that we just do it out of rote or habit or obligation, but that there are conscious decisions that are made based on priorities that aren't subject to the whims of what I feel like doing. I grew up in a pastor's home. I never came down on Sunday morning and said, hey, Dad, are we going to church today? That was not a question you asked. Of course we are. And Sunday night and Wednesday night and probably Monday night too, and Thursday night, come to think of it. So that just was the pattern of life. And, as God continues to bless you and your family, you're going to see the rewards of that more and more as that unfolds. So as you look back at your time at Maranatha, both of you were like super heavily into your college experience. You made the most of it, I would say. And, you both played on sports teams, as I recall. You played soccer, you played basketball. What else did you do?
I was in music. I was a music minor. We were both in society leadership. We were both in dorm leadership at one point. We both worked multiple jobs.
Yep.
We were both pretty involved in our local churches, multiple local churches.
So as you look back on your college experience, what parts of it do you see playing perhaps an even greater role than maybe you knew at the time? Obviously, academically, you both were well prepared, but I always say this, the college really can't take credit for the top students. Like, they would have been top students anywhere. Okay, I mean, academically, let's be honest. But there's the whole person aspect to it that is the developmental side, beyond the academic side. So what stands out to you as I ask that question in terms of the unexpected aspects that you realize were way more important than maybe you gave them credit at the time?
I think the relationships with the professors were the most formative, because more than any experience of doing anything, I look back and I hear professors in my brain all the time. And not just in what they said in the classroom, but the way they lived their life. And then the continued relationship that we get to have with professors that we know pray for us on a regular basis, that care about us, that love us, and are now friends is so precious. And so remembering back to those things, I would say at the time I had no idea how formative that would be.
You also have no idea how unique that is.
Yes. And how
you maybe got a little taste of it in law school. I'm sure you had a few professors you connected with.
But you realize it's unique because my classmates that came from big schools were kind of floored by the fact that they could walk up and talk to their professor and have any type of relationship with them. And I'm like,
that was new for them.
I know all my professors. They're all friends now. Wow. So, that's for me, that was that. And then, we both did a lot, and all of those experiences, I wouldn't take them back because I think they shaped us in a lot of ways. But there was a point where I realized, looking back, that I was doing a lot out of pride, and that just because I was doing everything, that didn't make it necessarily the right doing it in the right attitude all the time. And so I think that tempered my drive going into law school to pick and choose what was best, and to do that in the right attitude, and not to get sucked into doing something just for the prestige of it, because you're in a small pond and you can do a lot of cool stuff.
You remember we talked about, don't get sucked into things that are only law school important.
Yes.
Make sure it's real world value. And it is weird. I mean, there are things in law school that everybody gets real hyper about, and then afterwards no one will ever ask you if you did that, So
I think a couple weeks, about a month ago, we were back for a opportunity to speak in a business chapel. And when we were kind of talking about what do we tell students, what do we tell them a few years removed,
young children?
And we realized, man, we're far enough removed now that there's a whole cycle of kids, friends even, that have gone. So leader's great because you get to see all your friends again. But the students,
you see them and they got old, and you're like, what happened to you?
But one of the things that I shared with the business students is just remembering what Maranatha is about from a connection standpoint of, to Sidney's point, the colleagues, the friends that you make student to student, but then also the friends that we get to make with faculty and staff that will become lifelong ministry partners, whether that we're serving together at a specific ministry, or we're praying for each other, or we're supporting each other through various things. You never know how the paths will cross down the road. And it's those connections that, I think about our India missions.
I was just going to say, remember when we went to India?
Yeah.
Remember that one time when we went to India?
Yeah.
That was awesome.
It was.
Yeah.
And how Dr. Ninan is a close friend of both of us.
And now I hear you're going back.
We are.
He
Lord
told
willing.
me. I was there last week.
Yeah.
So he told me, hey, so Brendan and Sidney are coming over. And I'm like, what? And then I remembered, oh, yeah, Brendan was on that original team. Was that the original connection, or how did that unfold?
That literally was talking to him throughout that week and a half we were in India.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, but it's just neat how the Lord worked in this way. We stayed in touch. We ended up inviting him to our wedding.
Yeah, he said I drove over to their wedding.
He came to our wedding, and
I didn't even get to go.
He actually prayed at our wedding too.
That's awesome.
And from that, there's just been we visited him in Atlanta this last summer.
He is super excited to have you guys, and you are going to be blown away when you see what God's been doing on the campus over there. It didn't exist when you were there.
Yeah.
Right.
They didn't have land. They didn't have anything.
I think the piece of land they were looking at was
all that fell through.
Yeah, exactly.
You'd love estate planning and property law over there. Trust me, they got millennia worth, and nothing's filed, no titles, nothing. You can't do a title search. You just buy it and hope nobody comes out of the woodwork.
But India and Dr. Nina is the perfect example of the connections you can make from something like a missions trip, or in the business world, internship, or I mean, I think we shared with them, you never know that your classmate that you sat next to in BizCom might be a future business partner. I mean, you just never know how the Lord is going to use you or your fellow classmates or the connections that you've made with professors to where, I mean, I think back to, we both had opportunities to intern at the Wisconsin State Capitol. Steve Board's been awesome with that avenue of connecting us business students with that, or how many connections come from Corey Foffey, that the endless business alumni, that him being a staple of the Maranatha Business Department has allowed it to continue to thrive. I mean, I got the very last bits of Corey's ministry at Maranatha, but that just continues to flood of.
Well, he has hired so many grads as his ministry CPA business expands, and they've established themselves as an expertise, and you know, it's just continuation of that mentorship process on into the career and life. So I'm very proud of you guys. I know there's a lot of life and ministry to go, and I would love to think that it's all just one big upward trajectory of wonderfulness, but you'll go through rough waters, and you have. I mean, we've talked about some of the highlights, but there's plenty of doubts and questions and turmoil and situations that, you know, aren't fit for prime time exposition at this point. But you'll look back on those things and realize in hindsight what God was doing, and you'll see his hand in it. That's hard to see in the moment, but just so you know, we're super proud of you. And you know, I guess you're like my favorite student in law. I think that's how that works.
I'll take it.
Will you take that?
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
We're both Cubs fans, so we'll take it.
And that puts you a little closer. You know, it puts you a little bit in the kind of favorite minus. I don't know how to feel about that. But we love you guys, and we're so glad to spend a little bit of time and talk through this. Hopefully it's been helpful to those listening. And thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for joining us today. On Mission is a production of Maranatha Baptist University. Subscribe to On Mission on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to leave a review, as this will help other growing leaders find these conversations. For information about our guests, previous episodes, and general information about On Mission or MBU, go to mbu.edu/podcast. Join us again next week as we examine what keeps leaders on mission.